Hi, I'm not Sarah Williams. I'm here in place of Sarah Williams, the director of the Civic Data Design Lab, a research lab at MIT. I'm going to be talking about the Atlas of Lighting. First, I'll just talk about the lab a little bit for a couple of slides. We always start our projects thinking about this idea that no amount of data will change the world unless it's synthesized into tools that is specifically for the benefit of the public. So to put simply, we take data and then we make visual interpretations that communicates and broadens the audience of that data set. Is it moving? No. And the ultimate goal is to unlock data for policy change. So the projects in the labs typically go in 3 steps. First, we build it. We're all holding little data collectors on our person, whether it's a cell phone or a Fitbit, and these devices can be used to collect data from the perspective of the public and transform that data into resources that other people can use. For hacking it, we typically look at web and social media to collect our additional data, and we take this data back to use as a resource and also generate workflows and scripts for other people to use and draw from similar sources. Finally, it's really important for us to share things, tools that we build, methodology, and also to build relationships with stakeholders, as well as collaborate with different companies with special interests, as you will see this is an example of. So now I'm going to talk about the Atlas of Lighting. The Atlas of Lighting is a collaboration between MIT's Civic Data Design Lab, led by Sera, the Philips Lighting Company, and the Center for Advanced Urbanism, also in the architecture school at MIT. And we have quite a large team. I worked on this team as the visualizer, making the maps. The Atlas of Lighting is a collaboration, and it's based on the premise that lighting provides an economic and social good for cities, much like water or housing. Philips Lighting had a goal that they wanted to measure the social and economic value of lighting. As you can imagine, this is challenging and abstract. So, so we took that idea and ran with it in measuring the social. And especially in measuring the social, we try to combine qualitative and quantitative data sets. And we specifically use social media data to overlay with quantitative information we had about economics and physical lighting. So the Atlas had to address how we measure the value of lighting physically, socially, and economically. These were our 3 goals. The 3 major data sets we used was Nightlights data to measure light, Google business data and to measure economics, and social media data to understand social interactions that are happening in that physical space. What we ended up making was an interactive mapping tool, or an atlas, I guess. I'll talk a little bit about why we did what we did before showing the atlas. First, we had to decide what cities were in this atlas, and we compared population change and gross metropolitan product and ended up categorizing, according to these 2 factors, cities into these groups: large, slow growth, large, fast growth, Rust Belt, new economic quality, like new economy, quality of life hubs, and growth magnets. And then having that categorization, we worked with Philips and tried to incorporate their business strategy and interests to ultimately choose Chicago, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, San Jose, and Denver as the pilot cities for this atlas. The light data we gathered was from the VIIRS DNB Cloud-Free Night Lights data composite. Its resolution is 742 meters by 742 meters. This is a sample of what that data looks like across the month that we averaged them. We use the National Land Cover Database to identify low intensity, medium intensity, and high intensity development areas. I'm going to be using Chicago as an example. And then we use census data to identify income levels. Business data was then scraped from Google Places API. We got detailed data on name, location, hour type, hours, type, ratings, reviews, photos, and price ranges, and as well as their exact locations. The business data also had detailed category types that we later used. So this allowed for us to look at things like business density, business diversity, and so for social media data, we scraped Instagram from its API, and this data included usernames, location, timestamps, photo likes, tags, and comments, as you can imagine, the typical Instagram things. The images we scraped look like something like this. Google Place data, as well as the image data we scraped, were gridded into cells so that we could map them. And then we used machine learning to identify the topics and keywords in each of the Instagram images that we scraped. We had almost 700,000 images, and we used the Google Vision API platform to categorize these images into different topics. For example, the platform categorized, could recognize words that were tagged portrait versus images that were tagged portrait versus images that were tagged cityscape. So ultimately, having those terms returned to us, we categorized the images into 13 different categories that we thought were relevant to the subject that we're dealing with. So let me show you what the atlas does. This is a video that's just playing on my screen. Is it playing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So we're going to start with social media data. And what happens is on the left, we have different types of data sets. You can drag to the right, and those become filters for the map so that you can combine different data sets and see either keywords in this case, or let me fast forward a little bit. I haven't seen my mouse. And drill down to the street views and images that we collected. So you get this, you get multiple layers and different ways of describing a single spot from the different data sets that we collected. I'm trying to advance. So after presenting this initial platform, our Philips colleagues had a not surprising insight that that lighting has a very strong relationship to the economies of cities. We were immediately able to see that low-income areas have more light than high-income areas because of where they are in the city, and also that the quality of lights were themselves different from the social media images that we collected. Here is another screen cap of the tool looking at a more traditional data set. So this is income, and you can filter income to see that the lighting is different in different parts of the city and correlates strongly with higher density lighting. Lower income correlates with higher density lighting. I think it's okay. So Philips ultimately used this tool to develop a research report on the relationship between lighting and income. And they found that vibrant business areas associated with have a strong association with light. And what we ended up thinking more about was, okay, what the team got out of this project really was the ability to combine these different data sets and to come up with ways where people can compare and contrast very qualitative data and take it into a pipeline where it can now be a part of a map that's compared to something that's like lighting or income, and to explore that. So I'll just end by showing one example. One of the things that I felt was the most valuable thing was we produced a technical document that goes through all the processes we use to collect the data, the scripts and things like that, that you can dive deeper into after you experience the tool if you're interested. And I'll talk about one aspect of that to give an example. For data scraping, we try to be very efficient in extracting data sets from location-based services because APIs are highly variable depending on how you make requests for locations. So for Google business areas as well as Instagram, we really wanted to make as few calls as possible while not missing any data, which I imagine is a very common problem. Typically, this is the conventional method. We just made a grid and then of locations, and we scraped the areas that were covered. And when we started with Chicago, we saw a seemingly random distribution of businesses that was returned. But then when we put a finer grid in, we got a lot more. And it was very hard because we can't put the fine grid on everything. And so what we ended up with was creating the initial grid and then, based on the return and numbers, creating a finer subgrid for those areas with higher concentrations. This process ended up making the data scraping much faster, more scalable, and more replicable for different web services. And that's included in the technical document. So I hope that you'll enjoy the atlas. It's at atlas.lighting, which is a pretty good URL that I'm not responsible for. And we would love to have your feedbacks on the tool and any questions that I will try to answer. Okay.